Senator Den Hartog. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
You're back.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm thrilled that you came back. It was fantastic. You and I talked about choice
Yeah.
months back when it was like, again, we're just very high level conversation about, what our obligation is to children, what our obligation is to education. By the way, we're in the state PTA's office in the
I love
basement.
it.
It's
It's great.
fantastic. They sponsor the space. And when they told me that they had a spot, I was like, listen, I really want to be clear. I am going to engage in conversations about choice with both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
I want to engage in this conversation, and they wholly support it. They're like, we know we like conversations about education.
Good.
And so awesome. Thanks, PTA. But you and I spoke months back about this, and now it's happening. Like, things are happening. There's a $50 million line item in the governor's budget that has not been, obviously funded, but there's a line item there. All kinds of people are talking about all kinds of problems. It's almost like it's probably one of the greatest functional dominating topics that have come up.
Absolutely.
Other functioning thing, by the way, just a quick note. You guys passed a resolution in the Senate today to reject the citizen pay raise, the legislator pay raise.
Yes. So there is a citizens committee. It's in our Constitution that sets legislative pay. Legislators cannot increase or set our own pay. We think that is an important check and balance. But one of the things we can do based on Idaho's Constitution is reject a pay increase if that citizens committee decides to give us a pay increase. So we are currently paid $19,000 a year. The Citizens Committee hadn't been doing increases for quite some time, took a look at, what's going on, particularly in Idaho, and had decided to increase that to $25,000 a year. We had some folks who said, you know what, that doesn't feel right. At this moment where we have, families hurting with inflation, we still haven't dealt with grocery tax repeal or, increasing the grocery tax rebate that goes to families. And so we had a resolution to reject the pay increase, and that passed the Senate floor today. So I always think it's interesting when we talk about this. Sometimes people are surprised we only make $19,000 a year. And again, it's perfectly fine. It is a part-time legislature. Our pay has never been intended to be something that is a livable wage, that someone could only do this and provide for their family. It really is important that we retain being a citizen legislature. So we all have duties and responsibilities and jobs and businesses outside of the legislature that sustain us and our families. And so we did reject that pay increase today. We'll see what happens when it goes over on the House side. But I do want to note, we've spent a lot of time talking about it this week, and we spent a lot of time and effort trying to figure out, where folks were at. And I think the total amount that would have been impacted in the state budget had the pay increase gone into effect is about $500,000 a year. And we have a budget of, I think we're over $6 billion. So, just to put that in perspective, I think is healthy.
Okay. This is at the heart of the insanity that I see around you guys, because there's been so much fanfare over like this pay increase and like all of the things going out with Speaker Moyle. It's like, oh my gosh, like they're talking about like a pittance. Like, I don't think $500,000 is the sum total of the cost for the gasoline for ISP in the month of January.
Yeah,
and if you think about it, it's like we theoretically have like a 12 to 13 week session. Some people think it's going to go like 14 or 15. But if you look at that, you're like, okay, like a week was taken up, dominated. Everybody worried about this thing. A week. So 1/12 of the entire legislative session is spent arguing over, well, let's see, if it was $1 million, $6 billion, that would be like 0.025% of the budget or something. So it's like 0.0125% of the budget. Like, it's an absurd thing, but it's like makes good news. So all of a sudden everybody's worried about this pay raise that it's like, this is nothing.
And that's one of the challenges we face is responding to the issues that arise and then being able to deal with those. It's a lot harder to cut some of those really big budget items. So we are going to be spending a lot of time this session talking about Medicaid expansion and sideboards. Do we have, we're going to be submitting additional waivers. We've got to have a new federal administration. We're really excited about the Trump administration coming in and what our opportunities might be there to reduce costs in that program because those costs have been skyrocketing, and those are things that are squeezing the state budget in massive ways, and much more impactful in the overall state budget than the legislator pay raise.
Oh, yeah. Like you have, wildland and lands management, we have education, we have, BLM management, like the Lava Ridge program. Like we have all of these different things going on. It's like, this is what we're getting after, like this.
But I will tell you, this is one of the interesting parts about being in the legislature. And the media will pick up on this, particularly early in session when we haven't introduced a lot of legislation. And so there's only a few things to pay attention to. And so, a lot of times the media will pick up on, they're like, well, why are you spending all this time on this? And when that happens, I want to assure people it doesn't mean we aren't continuing to deal with those really big, really heavy, really complicated things that we know we have to take care of as your representatives when we're in the legislature. And so I think that, sometimes it can become a distraction outside the building. So, yes, this did seem to take up a lot of time and energy and oxygen in the building this week. But I will tell you that doesn't mean that all the other work halted. And so, we're going to talk about choice, and I'll tell you, I spent a lot of hours at the Capitol this week, and it's been a lot of hours on all those things. And so, I think it's important for people to understand what they hear in the media doesn't mean all 105 of us are all consumed with
like
this, one issue.
Sure. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Like totally understood.
Yeah.
Okay. So I bet you can't tell me, but like, are you going to be the one bringing the bill for? Okay. All right. So we
I can
can't
tell you all kinds of things.
Do you have a copy of it?
Like, no, I don't have a copy to give you. Yet.
Okay.
So
all right.
close. So close.
Okay. So I'm very pumped about this. Can you talk broad strokes and
absolutely.
Let's talk one, accountability, because obviously Governor Little made a big deal about accountability, responsible transparency.
Yep.
I just spoke with Representative Pickett. Representative Doug Pickett, and he is House Education Committee Chairman, but he was also in Tax and Revenue last year. And I was asking him, I'm like, okay, one of the biggest anxiety provoking things that people have that are opponents of choice is they say, we're going to cut these checks for things with no accountability. And that is something that people have been saying both on the left and the right, and or not left and right, but for and against. Yep. And the people against it are saying there's not going to be any accountability. And the people for it are like, well, parents are accountable. And then the other people are like, but there's no accountability. And so I asked Representative Pickett, I said, look, is there a single dollar that has ever been spent in Idaho's history that you know of that officially said, like, we're giving this dollar to this person, no strings attached, we're not following up, we're not doing anything with it? And he was like, no, that doesn't exist.
No, that's not how this works.
Right. So to be clear, the people that are saying, hey, there's going to be no accountability, that mechanism of giving out money with no accountability does not exist. It doesn't have precedence in the state of Idaho.
And that's not what we're proposing either. So a couple of things.
And you can't tell me what you're proposing. Okay, it's fine. Well, I'll have to wait till next week.
A couple of things to lay the table. So what I absolutely can tell you is what we'll be bringing next week is a refinement of the piece of legislation we brought forward last year, which is a refundable tax credit for families that are educating their child outside of the public school system. There's a lot of nuances to that, but the program primarily, and I get real testy about the type of language that gets used when we talk about the different things, because people who don't like what we're doing or don't like choice options, say voucher schemes or, voucher apparently polls terrible, but this is not a voucher. It is a refundable tax credit, which means it either reduces your tax liability to the state, or if you don't owe that much in taxes, you will get some money back. So
then it's not like refundable. Like if I pay zero taxes to the state of Idaho through income tax, because I know I pay, sales tax and stuff, but if I pay zero in income tax,
you would get, if you have and this is where we start talking about the structure. A family, let's say it's you. You have one child and you have educated that child outside of the public school system. If you have expenses, the amount that we have proposed, and it was in last year's bill, it's in this year's bill, it's an amount of up to $5,000 per child, unless your child has special needs, and then it's up to $7,500 per child. But you have to have incurred actual expenses. So we have a list of eligible education expenses. It could be tuition, tutoring, transportation, taking assessments, preparing for college exams, all kinds of things. We have a whole list of eligible education expenses. So a family has to actually incur those expenses in the education of their child outside of the public school system. So you have to, and this is why I love talking about accountability. So we have to think about accountability differently. Historically, when people think about accountability in our public education system, we're thinking about all of the reports that we require, all of the ways that we have transparency into how schools are spending the money.
Right. So, what is the dollar going to, and is it hitting the target?
So that hitting the target is a really interesting question. So we focused a lot on literacy in the last several years. It's been one of the top priorities of Governor Little. Well, what happens to a child in third grade if at the end of third grade they're not reading by grade level? Nothing. They move on to grade 4. Nothing happens. There's no reduction in funding. There's no going back to the school and saying, you didn't serve that child well. Nothing happens. We may know about it. That parent may understand that their child isn't reading at grade level. So where is the accountability?
And may I ask a question? It's my understanding that if one child out of 100 doesn't hit grade level and they move on to grade 4, there's no poo-poo on you school. People may not be happy. They're like, hey, you hit 99, we want 100.
Yeah.
But if 100 of those kids are not at grade level, then that does trigger, schools do come under review, and there are problems for schools if they fail to a certain degree to hit metrics. Am I mistaken?
It would have to be almost every single metric. It would have to be, because we do have a program in the State Department of Education where our lowest performing schools, where the State Department can come in and provide additional support and work with school leadership to revamp and revive whatever it is they may need to address. But it's never based on a single metric.
Gotcha. So the bottom line is there is a feedback loop, and in the event of a public school not hitting the metrics, what the State Department does is they come in and try to offer support and resources. So it's like, okay, you have the school building, you have these children, you have these teachers, something's not clicking. Let's help you figure it out.
Yeah. And that is a very, 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 very long road to get to that point where the department may step in. What we're talking about on the accountability side is we're starting with the parent. So if you're at that school where 99 out of 100 kids have met the mark in reading and are at grade level and they move on. But what if you're the parent of the one child who isn't reading at grade level?
And this is in the private setting.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you are that parent, who do you care about? Do you care about the 99 or do you care about the 1? You care about the 1 if it's your child. And so that's the parent. It's the parent's top concern that their child is progressing and growing in their academics, that they're safe, that they're happy, that they're well cared for in the place when they're outside of your home. And so we talk about parents first as that accountability metric. And so when we talk about a refundable tax credit, the structure is that, you go through your income taxes, and we can talk about some of the other particulars, but the money goes back to the parent. It's not the money going from the state to any particular school or entity or system. The flow of the money is from the state to the parent. This program is designed to operate strictly under the purview of the Idaho State Tax Commission. And maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but every year when you file your taxes, you sign an attestation that you're telling the truth. I don't know if you're aware of what the penalties might be if you lie on your taxes, but it's pretty significant, all the way up to a felony charge, and you could be thrown in jail if you're shown to lie on your taxes.
I'm pretty sure that's how they got Capone.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, right?
May I ask about when you're representing a parent who's concerned about their child, that's the number one concern, and that's the accountability for the private school. I don't think that really varies. That's no different than a parent in the public school. A parent in the public school, it's not like they care about their kid less. Nope. Or if the public school is like, hey, we're 99% great. I have a friend who has a daughter in middle school that was supposed to be going to Eagle High School. And she's like, I don't think I want my kid going to Eagle High School for whatever her personal reasons may be. And Eagle High School is touted to be a very good high school, right? So she's a public school mom who's like, my daughter is my main concern. So like, how is that? I'm failing to understand, like, how is this a unique accountability metric, public versus private?
So the difference is that if that parent of the student at Eagle High School chooses to move that student somewhere else, that parent, presuming they're a parent with means, can move them somewhere else because they care about them. Well, what happens left at the district? Is there a complete reduction in their funding because one student is left? No, the state has a protection for schools to say if you lose average daily attendance, if you lose students for whatever the reasons might be, the state protects public school districts. So we continue to pay them even when students have left. And so
we don't have a metric that says, hey, you had 100 kids this year, you're 100 kids average daily attendance, and you went to 90 kids average daily attendance. The school does not lose any money.
We have a 3%, we call it either the 97% or the 3% protection. So if they drop down below 97% of what their average daily attendance was, we protect them up to the 97%.
Gotcha. So they do have a drop.
Yeah, slight.
But it's slight.
But the difference is, so think about something in the private sector. So if a student leaves, so in full transparency, so my kids go to Nampa Christian, I pay tuition on a monthly basis. As soon as I leave, I stop cutting a check to the school. The moment my child walks out the door,
right,
I stop paying. There's no safety net. There's no backup for the school. And if for whatever reason families are leaving, and the other thing we have to remember is families look at school options for their child and for their children with all different variables on the table. You could have a school that is knocking it out of the park. Back to our example of the 99 and the 1, that looks on paper to be a fantastic academic place for kids to be. And maybe that one kid maybe is struggling in academics, maybe not. Maybe they're getting bullied and it's just not, they don't feel safe there.
Right.
And so you're looking for another option. So it doesn't mean, it's not a reflection on that school to say, oh, they're not a terrible school, they're a great school, but maybe it's just not the right school for that child. And I think that to me is what this is about. And, when we talk about, I think it's important to talk about numbers here. So the state spends almost half of its entire budget on K-12 public education. So I think we're right around $3 billion. What we're proposing in ours is a $50 million refundable tax credit with a cap. It can't increase unless, if we get this all the way through the entire legislative process and the governor signs it into law, that number can only be increased by a future legislature. And so I think that $50 million cap is a really important consideration for us as policymakers. We have control of the spending. And the other important consideration in terms of the structure of it is it's designed to have an application window before people file their taxes. And I have another comparable example for you to think about. An application window that parents have to identify again, those eligible education expenses, the actual incurred expenses. They have to provide a lot of information to the tax commission, and the tax commission would close that application window and then prioritize those with lowest incomes first to receive that refundable tax credit first. Now, we also have an option for our lowest income families to elect a one-time advance payment. So if they can't wait until that next tax year to get the refundable tax credit, they can elect one time to get an advance payment so that if they want to send their kids maybe to a small micro school, maybe do something like a co-op or a private school or whatever other settings they might have that are available to them, they can elect that one-time payment and use that up front and then qualify for the tax credit the next year. So some of these considerations, I think, like we've tried to bake into not only the process and the structure, is to hit on the targets that the governor has talked about, to be fair, to be transparent, to be accountable. There is nothing, if there is a misuse of public funds in a public school district, no one's getting thrown in jail.
What, can't you get thrown in jail for embezzling? Like, what do you mean?
It would be a pretty extreme example, but not if kids aren't hitting academic targets, not if, a family is unhappy and they leave. None of that is happening. And so this puts parents in the driver's seat, and it holds them accountable for how the funds are spent. We have the structure of the legislation also has a reporting function for the state tax commission to provide information back to the legislature on how many families applied, what their income levels were. If we have more than the 50 million, if we have more than that, we are asking the tax commission to maintain a wait list so we understand what the demand might be and what the availability might be around the state.
Got it. Thank you for sharing these details. There's a lot here. When we use public, because there's a lot of comparison between like the public school and private school. Okay. So when you're saying, hey, if this school does a bad job, there's no accountability, like nothing happens. And when you were saying that, it's like, okay, we only know about the public schools or private schools that are in existence today because they're still in existence. We don't know of the private schools that started and stopped or failed to, achieve significant attendance or whatever it might have been. These are private businesses, and businesses go out of business all the time, left and right. So
I know of a couple schools that have gone out of business, but
there you go. So taking that into account, when you're saying, hey, look, if a public school does a bad job, there's no like decrease in revenue and stuff, or there's no accountability. Well, I think couldn't the same be said for private school? Like essentially, if the state funds a parent's expenses and those expenses go to that private school and that private school does a terrible job, it doesn't actually, like say the private school engages in academics that aren't valuable per like the curriculum the state would deliver like based on our constitutional mandate, right?
So I think it's really important to know that we are not doing this in a vacuum. So market forces are real. Human nature is real. So if a school is that terrible and doing that terrible,
no, I'm not saying terrible.
Job,
I'm not saying terrible. I'm saying
not meeting all of that. I don't believe, and I would love to find some Idahoans who might believe that. I believe that school will not stay in existence. And I've been around this valley long enough. I've seen private schools come and go.
Right. So if that happens, then the money that we spent, we have no recourse in the private sector either. Just like you're saying, hey, there's no recourse in the public sector. There's no recourse in the private sector. And there's definitely no recourse. We're saying we're going to make everybody accountable to parents. Well, the parents take the money, they select a school based on whatever it might be. Say that school, whatever it is, right? There are a lot of extreme examples that get brought up, but let's not go crazy extreme. But let's just say, hey, the purpose of this money is to engage in a public education that has analogous results to the public school values, right? Test scores, whatever they might be. If they fail to do that, it's like, that money's gone. There's no account. It's not like anybody gets thrown in jail.
It doesn't keep going there year after year after year after year. It ends. If a parent leaves and the funding leaves with them, the student leaves and the funding leaves with them, that school cannot stay in existence. If they're not meeting, again, you have to remember, like, market forces are real. Human nature is real.
Yeah.
And parents demanding, this is part of what I think is really important for us, is that right now, families with means already have choice. It's why they choose where to buy a home.
Yes.
It's how much their mortgage is. It is, if they're in a neighborhood, they don't like their school, they can afford to drive across town and go somewhere else. And so the difference is you start providing options and opportunities and give resources to families who may not be able to make that choice today for whatever reason. This is part of one of the things I'm really passionate about is, sometimes we get accused of wanting to, dismantle or destroy public education. And you and I have talked before about this ecosystem. Like, the majority of our kids get educated in the public school system. I want the public school system to be great. But again, back to our example of this other kid, a school can be great on paper, it can have amazing academics, and you could have a kid that is just not the right spot. And I know that from our own school.
I know that from my own family. I understand that intimately.
Yeah. And so I think the accountability in my mind is that when it stops working for that family and they need to go somewhere else, that school stops getting the funding for that. It's gone. It's going to go somewhere else.
So the accountability, then when you say we need to think about accountability different, what you're saying is, hey, look, we actually no longer care about, we're not looking at accountability like we would look at a public school accountability, which is like, what are your test scores? Like, what are your graduation rates? All that. We're going to throw that out the window. And we're going to say, look, we're going to let the market force figure out what schools work. And that's it.
I actually think that is really powerful. So I'm actually not a huge believer in test scores. I know from myself as a parent, as a mom, particularly not. I care about like their weekly work, their quarterly work. When they have semester exams, those kinds of things. But if it's some kind of national test and standard, frankly, I'm not as interested in that. I want to know from their teacher, like, okay, are they growing? Are they learning? Are they being challenged? And in that, I'm looking at those teachers who are designing the quizzes and tests and conversations along the way during the semester to answer that question of academic growth. And that's where, again, none of these things are happening in a vacuum. So think about all of the amazing teachers we have all across Idaho. And you had mentioned before and made me think, I'm skipping around a little bit, but
No, go.
But when you were talking about, well, we don't know about the private schools that don't exist today, this is actually one of the things I'm most excited about with a piece of legislation like this is, okay, yeah, we kind of know the lay of the land today. We know what schools exist. We know where there might be seats available. But what about the innovation that something like this could spark, particularly in rural areas where maybe there aren't any other options? So maybe you have a teacher that's like, thinking about something that they want to do, some unique opportunity, some specific segment of students that teacher might be interested in serving. Under something like this, if a teacher were to start something up, parents could say, yeah, I have interest in that. I believe in you. I trust you. And I can use these funds. Maybe we start a small micro school to serve 10 or 15 kids. So there's a lot of unique opportunities. And I'm frankly really excited about the potential for innovation in this space. And I think we can't limit our thinking to what exists today.
I'm glad you brought up rural. I was speaking with, again, Representative Pickett earlier, and he said he grew up in a, small place.
Yes.
And he was at once complimentary of the more rural-based education, saying that like the rural public schools have such tight-knit communities in general. Their community schools reflect more of their community than larger areas. But I also asked him, I was like, do you think we are currently upholding our constitutional obligation, especially as it's reflected in rural school districts, to supply educations? Like, are we checking all of the boxes we're constitutionally obligated to check currently today with our public schools?
I think the answer is we're not there yet, and we're never going to be fully there. There's so much need. So in the last 5 years, we've increased K-12 spending in the state of Idaho by over 50%. And some people would argue that's a lot of money, going from $1.5 billion to $3 billion. And in the time that we've done that, do you know how much student enrollment growth has gone up? It's been a marginal 2 to 3%. And we've had, some spikes and some declines in student enrollment.
And over what period of time was that?
5 years, in the last 5 years. And so when you look at the cost per student and the amount that the state has increased in the last several years, again, people's definition of what is adequate or what is enough. And I always ask this question when people are like, well, we don't fund enough. We don't pay enough per student in the state of Idaho in public education. And I was like, well, what's the number? Massachusetts, I think, spends over $30,000 per student every single year. Now, they have pretty stellar academic results, but when you look at the state of Idaho and what we spend per student, I think we're right around $9,000 now.
Yeah.
And we're about middle of the road across the country for academic outcomes. That's a pretty good return on investment. I think
we're number one ROI. Bang for the buck.
Our communities and our schools and our teachers and our educators are doing a great job. And one of the things is just so important for me to share is that when we advocate for choice, it's not a reflection, and I know people take it that way, but it's not a reflection to say all of our other existing choices are terrible. I would never say that. What's interesting is a lot of the same arguments that are being used against a program like this, a refundable tax credit, were used when the state of Idaho tried to start charter schools in 1998. And look at where we are with public charter schools now. Thriving, growing, serving unique student populations, getting started in rural communities. And it's so exciting. And so some of that takes time, right, to build up that ecosystem. And we'll continue to support that. The state's support for public education is not going away, even if we are able to get something like this all the way through the process.
I really want to point out that your point on charter schools is so deeply taken by me, because there are, again, I like education. I liked my education. I think we need the best, most educated populace we can possibly get, within reason. Like we're not jacking up to 30,000 like Massachusetts, but having charter school options. There's a charter school that opened just a few miles away from me, and it's a no tech charter school. So like you have kids diagramming sentences, you have them coming home with homework, you don't have them looking at screens all day, or even a portion of the day. They don't have one-to-one technology. They wear uniforms. And that is, I think, for students that go to my neighborhood elementary school, that where kids do have one-to-one devices and they do spend a certain amount of time on those devices per day. If you don't want that, here you have the state-funded alternative. And so again, to make the point, it's like I could see starting a charter school system having the same objections that people have to a choice system. But again, I like that we have that charter school. I like that it's like, okay, great. If you don't want your kid on tech, you don't have to spend $40,000 a year to go to like a no tech school. You know what's so funny?
So exciting.
It's like, okay, when I was going to school in that like elementary school, I remember like 92 or something, or it's like 10, fourth grade. We got this computer lab, and the computer lab, I remember they had these, they had CD-ROMs. Remember the CD-ROMs that like the tray came out and you'd hit the button 1,000 times to get it to come in and out?
I just saw a picture of a 3-inch floppy disk, and someone, it was a meme, and someone had said, look, they learned how to 3D print the save icon on your computer.
Oh my
Isn't that
God.
Great, right? So that resonates.
God, that takes me back. Right. And what about the 5-inch floppies?
The ones that were really
those,
floppy? They were actually floppy. I remember those.
So I remember, and it doesn't matter. But the point is, I had this computer lab and we all thought it was crazy. And they had like a copy of Encyclopedia Britannica. And we're like, this is wild. And the Britannica actually had like these little videos of like monkeys and stuff, like whatever it is. Yeah. And then actually Bill Clinton came to my high school in like 95. I was in 7th grade, right? And I think my brother like met him or something, but he came because again, I grew up in like a lower end, working class spot. And so he came to promote tech in schools. It used to be if you had tech, you were happening, man. We had a computer lab, we had the internet, like it was crazy. And now if you don't want tech, those are the expensive schools. Like if you want like a Waldorf school, or they're like, listen, your kid's not going to see a screen at all today. Like we're going to be doing this other, so the paradigm is completely flipped. And again, back to the point on charter schools, I was looking at that like, gosh, there's no way I could ever afford, some private school like that. And if I want, here's this charter school that's supplied and funded by the state of Idaho. So I do appreciate that.
And I think, we're Americans, right? We love options. We love choices. When do we say we have enough choices? And I think that to me is exciting. I mean, think about the grocery store and like, every different variety of.
You go to the cereal aisle.
Cereal. How did you know? I was thinking of cereal. I was thinking of all the different.
You look up and down the 500-yard shelf like, whoa.
Every from as sugary as you want that you're like, think you're eating dessert for breakfast to, the crunchiest of crunchy granola. Like you got it all, right? We love choice. And what I've said to people, like, again, what we're talking about for something like a refundable tax credit is just a piece of it. It's just a piece of what we get to talk about in education. And the other way I think we struggle when we separate it like this, we somehow think, we have all these kids in our public K-12 school system, and somehow all the kids that are not in that, or who potentially would like a different option, are somehow suddenly not Idaho kids, not from Idaho families. We have right now, I think it's about 36,000 students in the state of Idaho who are not in the public education system, whether they're homeschool, private, or doing something else. They're no less Idaho kids than the kids who are sitting in our K-12 classrooms in a public school or a public charter school. And so I think when we recognize when we can recognize that, we can look and say, we can do both of these things.
Wait, who's saying that the the private school or the homeschool kids aren't Idahoans?
Come listen to some of our hearings, and
those people are whack.
You'll hear the theme. I've run enough of legislation in this space that's exactly how it feels.
How does this make sense at all?
They're
like if you have somebody
citizens,
because they homeschool?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard it over and over again in public testimony.
Man, listen, next time you hear some monkey say that stuff, like send him over here. I shouldn't say monkey, crazy person. That's better. Next time you that's ridiculous. I know so many people that homeschool and I love these people and they're more Idahoan than I am.
And for a wide variety of reasons, right? This is what's interesting. I think we always try to put people in a box of like why you would pick something or do
you gotta
this
be honest
or
with
do
me.
that.
You got to be honest with me. People are really saying this, that like if you homeschool, you're not actually an Idahoan. People are trying to market it.
They treat you like a second-class citizen. Yes.
That's really unfortunate.
Yeah,
like
really
all jokes aside, that's
it really is.
Yeah.
And we had Mountain States Policy had done a study. I've always done a back of the napkin calculation, and then they went and did the actual calculations for me. But the students who are not in public schools, for parents who have made different choices for whatever reason, and there are a wide variety of reasons, and those reasons may even shift over time, those students represent an annual savings to the state of Idaho of over $300 million every single year because they don't walk through the door of a public school, so the state doesn't have to pay for them. So if we're, and this is where we think about tax revenue and public dollars, which is your dollar and my dollar. We start thinking about these things because they can be really big numbers and it can be hard to wrap our minds around. But these families represent, and I think it's important to acknowledge that they represent a savings to the state. So we have a constitutional obligation and responsibility to pay for those kids when they walk through the door. We have done that. We are going to continue doing that. That is never going to change. We can argue over the amount or how it is or, what it's spent for, sure, but that's never going to stop. I don't anticipate someone coming in and trying to amend our Constitution to strip out public education. That's a core value here in Idaho and all across this country. But I think it's important to acknowledge that these families who have made a different choice do represent a savings to the state. And to me, it's an important acknowledgement.
Man, there's a lot.
I know.
Is this bill coming out next week?
Yes, that's the plan. We're excited.
Do you know what day?
I'm not going to tell you what day. I'm not going to tell you what day. Stay
tuned. Stay tuned. Will you come back when it comes out?
Absolutely.
Because I already have people, like I have the ISBA, like I already have people who are like, when this bill comes out, I want to come on. And it's like, yes, you can come on, but I want Senator Den Hartog on like at the exact same time. Like,
awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. And again, like, let's hash it out. Yeah. Let's hash it out. There's no, like all things, right? There's no position that I could even conceptually take that it's like you're 100% right. Yeah. There's, I keep putting out clips, obviously from all the interviews, people on one side, people on another side. And all of the objections, it's like, even if the clips are complete polar opposites in sentiment, one's for, one's against, all of the people that commented, I was like, yep, I see that. Like, I can see where people are coming from.
And that is the value of having the public debate. And yes, what we want and what I think you're trying to do is to make sure that people can be heard, that their words can't be twisted, that they can speak for themselves about their genuine positions and the beliefs that they hold. And that is something we value as Idahoans. Like, we value being able to have this back and forth dialogue in a very civil way. And at the end of the day, we may disagree or we may find ourselves in agreement, and we move forward either way. And I think that is what we want to promote at the legislature. We know things get heightened and sometimes that gets lost in the mix. But I want to assure people, like, when we're having these types of debates, with our colleagues, when we're trying to figure out what elements to include in a piece of legislation, because we're trying to figure out what their concerns are and can we address their concerns, it's genuine and it's real. And it means we have to talk and share. It means we have to be willing to listen. And it means we have to maybe be willing to change our position from time to time.
Yes. And might I say, the original conversation you had when we were talking, this is before all these details, but you said, you're like, listen, this may end up costing us more money. But you're like, but we have this constitutional obligation to provide education. And for some people in the state of Idaho, that constitutional obligation is not being met and they've removed their kids from the school. And I was like, dang, man, like what a fair position to take. Right. And it's like, yeah, it may end up costing us more money, but like, that's like, we have to we have to at least tend towards fulfilling the obligation.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you coming on and explaining this.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, this platform is you guys. Like the platform is like, I have nothing to add to this.
I don't think that's true,
but I really appreciate you coming in. I actually just met with both the Republican and the Democrat people in the Senate today down at the Capitol, and both are lining up interviews. Like, God bless it. Like, let's bring this to the state of Idaho. You're helping me do that. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much.